It was Bill Clinton with the slave. You had to have upward mobility to even have a ship to come over. Now, they brought their slaves, but I just told you the founders of the original U.S. Corporation, the Virginia Company, were Moors, Charles II and Sir Francis Bacon. So just like in Django, Charles Samuel Jackson's character represented the European Asiatic Moor. The captor was his slave, who he put in his seat. So that's how we have to look at these movies here. We can't look at it through the program lens that they put upon us, because we're going to see ourselves as that, and that's a misapplication. We must apply more science. And if you apply that word to an Asiatic, you're misapplying science, because it's scientifically impossible for us to be that, because that's not our condition.
Well, Amani, you make a good point there, but one thing, too, that I notice is that in some of those old statutes, like going back to the 1670s, 1680s in Virginia, when they start talking about deeming people to be enslaved, right? And from looking at some old court records that Paul Hynek had published in that book, The Free African Americans of Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, where he has about 2,000 or 3,000 different cases, I notice is that there seems to be an instance where there are some albino Europeans that were subjugated, along with some of the Moors, in that there were a combination of some of the Moors and albinos that were together doing it. So the way that I see it from looking at a historical context and paralleling it to today is that just like how in all of the major cities, you'll have majority of brothers and sisters that's in the cities, and then within the police chiefs, the policemen, slave patrollers, or whatever have you, the majority of them are unconscious Moors. But then on the same token, you do have some of the albino Europeans that are over some of those precincts, and they just have the brothers and sisters going in and capture their own, and where, in fact, there are certain instances where there are some albino Europeans that do get brutalized too, but they may not be in prison in the high numbers as us, but it's still a combination in some shape, way, or form, like how you have with this, what do y'all call it, that Occupy movement, and how the years there's always been those marches and stuff and those protests when their WTO has their have their meetings, and when they do all of that protesting in front of the United Nations. So it seems like it's to a certain extent too, it's dealing with like a class struggle where it's a combination of different cultures of people, because even when you start looking back at, when they use the term like free people, like the freedmen, then they start saying free people of color in the history context, and where that comprised like some people coming from China, some of the people that actually were from Hindustan, combination of people from here, some people that may have been from Africa, not in a large number though. So it seems like to me that it wasn't just like all albinos were enslaved and all Moors were free. It seems like there was a combination of traitor Moors and traitor albinos turning against their people, just like how it is today.
That's
you know what I'm saying?
Right. Let me just clear my statement.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we're clear when we understand when they use the word slave is referring to the pale-skinned Europeans. Now, as far as captives, prisoners of war, servants, that's us. But remember, I just read to you from Michael Hoffman how the academics have successfully misapplied the word today, and they threw it off themselves, put it upon us, and they call themselves the captives, the prisoners of war. Now, but let me just highlight this whole thing about Asiatics doing this to other Asiatics. I'm going to read from the records about the Yamasee War.
Right.
And it says here, in the 3 years immediately preceding the outbreak of the Yamasee War in 1715, market involvement once again brought sweeping changes to the fabric of Carolina-Indian exchange relationships, this time with respect to the Indian slave trade. So it says here that the Yamasee and Lower Creek slave raiders may have begun to experience difficulties prior to the war. The principal slaving targets, Appalachia and Gullah and Florida, had probably been victims well before 1715. As a result, the center of gravity of the slave trade appears to have shifted west, where Upper Creek and Chickasaw warriors stepped up to brutal business in pursuit of Choctaw and other French-allied Indian victims. New Jersey and New Hampshire also took measures to curtail Indian slave imports by levying a duty of 10 pounds on every slave brought into port. The loss of these markets left Carolinians with only two major buyers for their slaves, Carolina rice planters and the West Indies, principally Jamaica, Barbados, and Bermuda. Now, isn't this interesting? To where, hell, you have these slave raiding taking place, where it was so bad that New Jersey and New Hampshire had to stop people from bringing in the slaves because they had so many of them, and they started adding a tax upon them. You see, so, but all this took place there in the Americas. You see, so, but who were the slave raiders? Creek and Upper Creek, Chickasaw warriors, etc. Now we can continue here that before the Great War, the Yamasee War, 1715 to 1718. Let's get into this here. There's a guy named Kufi. Kufi informed the British that they will be attacked in their sleep by the Yamasee. So he gave them heads up. Why would he do that? Because Kufi and his family were captured by Yamasee warriors. See, so what he did was to get the favor of those British merchants to get on their side against the Yamasee, so that's why he gave them that intelligence. And it states here, no better case illustrates the uniqueness of the boundary between freedom and bondage for many southeastern Indians than that of Kufi, who received a commendation of the Commons House of Assembly on August 12, 1715. He had endeared himself to the South Carolinians 4 months earlier by bringing the first intelligence of the Yamasee Indians' design to massacre the English. As a reward, the Assembly ordered that he receive out of the public treasury a sum of 10 pounds and a coat. And it says here, at some point, Kufi appears to have shed his slave status by the means that are not apparent in the records, and to have resumed his status as a U-Haul Indian. Now, this book is called The Yamasee War. But now, it keeps saying Indian, Yamasee Indians, and all these Indians. But now so everyone's clear on what the Yamasee looked like. I have an actual, probably the only physical description on the record, and this comes from General Thomas S. Woodward's work in his letters, who was an Army general who fought in the War of 1832. He also fought in the War of 1812, along with General Washington or George Washington in 1812. So he is revered in military annals in the States, but he's not talked about. There's a reason they don't want you to know about him. But in his letters on page 112, he describes the Yamasee. And he says the Yamasee as having deep, dark skins, coarse hair, thick lips. So there you have it. So it's interesting that moving 12 years as a slave, everything took place right there in the Americas, just like the similar situation I just read from the Yamasee War. You see, but we're not taught any of that information because they spin it and they reconstructed it. But it's always been us against us. That's been the case, and it's still the case today. So I want to be very clear on that. That yes, we warred with each other, and the losing side, were put into, we were extracted for their physical labor, and the females were captured and were married. They had to marry into the families of the winning side. So that's what's been going on between us for eons.
But let me ask you this. Do y'all know of a law that was passed in the late 1800s where it made it illegal from that point to actually purchase pale-faced Europeans as slaves? Have you heard of that?
I've heard of the, what is it, the White Slave Acts?
Yes.
Okay,
that's actually global. As a matter of fact, that's global. I remember back in 10 years ago, I used to trade currencies online. So I had an account down in Panama, and I got with it was this company called Saley Securities, online trading platform. I contracted with them. But now it's interesting, in the contract, they had that clause in there that if you are in any way involved in pale skin slavery, they don't want to contract with you. I thought that was interesting, that they actually had it in the contract. Now, the founders of that securities company in Panama are actually pale-skinned Europeans from Germany. But they found it necessary to put that clause in their contract in modern day. Isn't that interesting?
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So which means that they are fully aware of their real condition, but they got comfortable in the seat that they've been placed in by those Moors from Europa, and so they don't want to go back to their true condition. You see, so it's it's like you click your heels twice, and then all of a sudden you're in this regal dress, and you're the ruler. You don't want to go back to your real true state, so you have to create lies, and so you survive upon those lies. And as Michael Hoffman pointed out in the book I just read, he said that the academics and other media communications have been successful with their fraud, and that's what's going on.
Yeah. Well, Santasha, I gotta go, and you have a really good show, brother. It's always a pleasure to hear your knowledge. I mean, you dropped some stuff on me I had no idea of. So, I look forward to your show, Santasha. So I want to say thank you.
All right, bro. All right, you're welcome. Peace and love, and thank you for tuning in.
Take care.
Thank you.
Caller is 707. Welcome to Civil Alert. Please state your name, where you're calling from, your question or comment.
Peace, this is Brother Big calling from California. How y'all doing?
What's up, brother? I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing well.
That's good. What's on your mind?
Well, what was on my mind was in light of the whole revelation of that there were Moorish Europeans. I guess when you think about that whole slave name paradigm, wouldn't that then be the case that that's more of like the slave is more like the slave master's name? I mean, if there's the paradigm is that the pale-skinned European, that's his last name, but in light of the actual history, wouldn't that not be his slave master or his landowner's family name? Even considering like the coat of arms and how some of them even depict Moors on the coat of arms.
Right. Well, those names are not their names. Those names are the progenitors of their species, and those progenitors are Asiatics. You see, so you have some of the great ancient names of Europa, like Douglas.
Mm-hmm.